COVID-19, the global pandemic that has affected every single one of you in this room. But I bet that none of you realize the people who were affected the most, healthcare workers. Every day they tackle the COVID-19 virus, completely discarding their personal needs as people depended on them to make things normal again. But these workers soon became frustrated as they were not given the proper support to carry out their jobs. They were extremely committed though, as they made several sacrifices for the general public on a daily basis. But it became more and more difficult for them as the virus got worse and the help they received decreased. So today I'll be informing you on the sacrificial lambs of healthcare. For my content outline, I will be starting out with my connection to the stimulus material and how that led me to my research question and thesis. I will talk about the heroism narrative, the mental health effects, and then go into my solution and limitations. The first stimulus material to pique my interest was the dark side of resilience. I wanted to challenge the idea of that which does not kill us makes us stronger, as I felt it was not true in some cases. I just had to find a specific case. With the mediations of Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antonius Book 5, the quote, "Suppress a thought and the cry, I am hurt," is gone. Suppress I am hurt and you suppress the injury. Maybe think about how people suppress their own feelings for the sake of others. And this led me to healthcare workers during COVID-19, which led me to my research question of to what extent did the heroism narrative affect healthcare workers during COVID-19? And my thesis statement of all of their commitment to communities was admirable. Healthcare workers were held to unrealistic expectations, and it forced them to sacrifice their health and personal lives, which made their mental health suffer severely. So, why is this a problem? The pain and stress that frontline healthcare workers endured was extremely unpleasant, and the general public only made it worse as they put these unrealistic expectations on them. They were tasked with making things normal again, which was essentially impossible. During the rise of the pandemic, healthcare workers were challenged with rapid workplace changes, increasing uncertainty at work, along with fear of contracting the virus. Nurses, doctors, and researchers were expected to deal with the virus that they had no concrete knowledge of, and although they were publicly praised for their sacrifices, people failed to realize the adverse side of this bravery. Catriona L. Cox, a junior doctor at the University of Cambridge, says that the heroism narrative fails to acknowledge the importance of reciprocity, and through its implication that all healthcare workers must be heroic, it can have negative psychological effects on the workers themselves. The heroism narrative was supposed to be a positive and encouraging support system for healthcare workers, but it just ended up providing them with stress and detrimental health effects. Isabella Backman from Yale School of Medicine mentions the topic of nurses as sacrificial lambs in 2020. The expectation of nurses and low-income health workers to place themselves heroically at the front line led to disproportionate amounts of illness and death among these groups. The entire world was depending on these frontline healthcare workers treated with the virus, but completely discarded their health and well-being. She adds that nurses' pleas fell on deaf ears, and that although nurses were celebrated for their sacrifices, little effort was done to keep them safe in their workplaces. People also failed to realize the amount of sacrifices that they made for the sake of others. Here's a video from PBS NewsHour where an ICU nurse talked about the different sacrifices that her coworkers had made.
The patients aren't going to stop coming. They're going to keep coming, and there's nothing that we can do to stop that. So, I mean, we have to do what we have to do to be able to care for them. So, yes, we're tired, but we have nurses that are picking up extra shifts and, canceling plans and getting people to watch their kids so that they can come in and help. We have nurses that are coming in that have been, on maternity leave and have been doing PRN positions, and they're coming in picking up shifts.
For more on how
Many workers also sacrifice their personal lives as families as they try to keep them safe. A nurse from China says, "I stay at a hotel every day and I'm afraid of getting my family sick. I'm afraid to go home and I haven't seen my mom and dad in a long time." Even if the workers knew it was not necessarily good for them, they continued to look out for others as they felt it was more important. Families were affected as well, as they had to feel the absence of their family if they were healthcare workers. An article published by the National Library of Medicine, the world's largest biomedical library, says that one study of registered nurses providing critical care to COVID-19 patients found that 38% had symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, 57% had mild to severe depression, and another 57% had anxiety. These statistics illustrate the amount of mental trauma that these workers experienced during the pandemic. These effects made it difficult to go to work every day and risk their lives to treat others, but the world was depending on them, so they essentially had no choice. This pandemic could have also caused burnout for a passion that these workers really loved, making them not want to return when things had settled down. When the pandemic first turned up, healthcare workers felt immediate effects like nightmares, fatigue, and anxiety, and the families of these workers could feel some of these effects too. Grief from losing a loved one, whether the worker died or the family member died, can put people in a state of depression, anxiety, and lead to heavy substance abuse. Healthcare workers, as well as their families, may feel these effects as the worker fears bringing the virus home and the family is scared of the worker contracting it. Society has failed to realize the mental strain that was put onto these frontline healthcare workers because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and nothing will change if people do not recognize it. COVID-19 will not be the last virus to touch our earth, and until society does something about the treatment of healthcare workers, nothing will change. Though appreciated, just thanking healthcare workers does nothing to help them in the actual workplace. So how can this problem be solved? Two solutions to help support healthcare workers are to have mental health services placed in all hospitals and healthcare centers, and to just be more transparent about the negative things happening in healthcare. This way, mental health problems can be assessed whenever needed, and people can start being more aware about the mental stress that healthcare workers go through. Having more knowledgeable people on this topic allows for more change and support that can make the lives of healthcare workers a little bit easier. This solution overall benefits the workers as they can get the stress they have off their backs, and the patients as they will be able to receive the best service from high-quality workers. Although this solution has great benefits, there are also some limitations. Not all workers may be willing to talk about the mental issues they are having, and some workers just may not have the time to step away from their jobs, as being a frontline worker can be very demanding. Society needs to realize and look into how we can provide the most support for our healthcare workers as they extremely need it. In conclusion, we need to provide more support to our healthcare workers because just as they protect us, we need to protect them. And this is why I'm excited.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. How did your research question evolve as you moved through the process?
So in the very, very beginning, I had like a completely different topic. I was gonna talk about like fears and how like basically trauma, like when people go through traumatic events, it can help them erase their fears. So like in the beginning, I had like a completely different topic, but I soon realized like going into my research that one, it just wasn't a lot of evidence on this specific thesis. Like it was very, very, I guess you could kind of say broad, and it was just really hard to have like a narrow focus on it. And it was just gonna be a little bit like unorganized if I was to talk about it. So I ended up having to like switch my entire research question, and I kind of still wanted to talk about trauma a little bit and how like certain people were affected from traumatic events, and COVID-19, everyone knows about COVID-19, and that's a very traumatic event. So I wanted to talk about that, and yeah, that's how my research question changed.
Okay. How is your conclusion in conversation with the body of literature or other research sources that you examine?
So from my research, I feel like it's kind of like 50-50 when you look at it, because you have half that are like, we're supporting our healthcare workers and things like that, and they have like different websites that support them and stuff, and you have the other half where it's like, we're not doing enough and we're not giving them enough. So I think that my research really adds to the other side where it's like, we're not giving them enough, and it just, you know, we need to give them more, we need to support them more. So I think that my conclusion really adds to or challenges the other side where it's like we're giving them the support they need, because we're really not. So as you can see, like they're still going through a lot, and even though COVID is dying down, like the trauma that they still have is still going to be there. So I think that this really challenges the side where they said that we're giving them enough when we're not.